Let's talk about what your survival-based childhood taught you about self-worth. To explore this as deeply as possible, I'm going to make a clear differentiation between what a healthy childhood looks like. No childhood is perfect, of course, and an unhealthy survival-based childhood. I'll do it briefly because all that we need is the foundation to then look at the deeper logistics. Healthy childhood. Healthy boundaries, individuation, and differentiation. Basically, the allowance of any individual to become an autonomous individual in the healthiest way possible through how they think, how they feel, how they behave autonomously. Survival based is very different. Survival based consists of fight, flight, freeze, fawn. And when I say survival, what I want you to think of is basically somebody whose identity was taught to do things that weren't authentic for it in order to survive. So essentially, it was a surviving identity. People that were raised in a healthy childhood with healthy boundaries, individuation, and differentiation, they learned to determine their own self-worth intrinsically. People that were raised in survival with fight, flight, freeze, fawn, they were taught that their self-worth is external. It is extrinsic. It is outside of them, in another person or multiple people or in a thing. People that had severely fucked up childhoods with even more severe dynamics of survival, they really lacked development in the sense of ego state. Some people got such fucked up childhoods that like their ego state is literally just like flickering. Like, you look at a candle that's like all the way down, like all the way down. I hope that this metaphor works. And it's like basically flickering. It's at its last. It's slightly just existing. People that got severely not only survival based childhoods, but just like a lack of everything necessary, a lack of mirroring, a lack of emotional containing, a lack of identity, they learned to outsource their self worth because that's what their parents taught them to do. Their parents didn't give them the healthy boundaries and then be like, all right, you're worthy, you're good enough. Now I'm going to teach you how to validate, approve of, and accept yourself, and you won't have to look outside of yourself for that. I'll make it very clear right now. Um, Seeking self worth externally, extrinsically, is fucked up. It's unhealthy. A healthy individual does not seek self worth externally, extrinsically. They validate themselves. They approve of themselves. They accept themselves. They love themselves. They are self determined. Nobody else. And so, what you need to understand about the survival based part, let's look deeper at the entire dynamic of an identity that did a bunch of things that it didn't want to in order to survive. Oh, it didn't actually want to please the parents because that wasn't its fucking job. It's not a child's job to please its parents. It's a child's job, and I don't even look at it as a job. It's just a matter of development. The child's place is to learn and explore the child themselves, not do a bunch of different things that violate its boundaries, that lead to a lack of individuation and a lack of differentiation. This is the difference between surviving and being raised in a healthy childhood. Do you see the difference here? And really zoom in, focus in on this whole idea of an identity that did things because it learned that it needed to survive. An identity that seeks self-worth extrinsically, externally, does things to receive self-worth externally, extrinsically, so that it can survive. It's pretty much the same thing. The identity needs the external to survive. You see this a lot in people with, I'm not going to go into logistics or specifications, but And I don't like labels, but just like for the sake of the video, narcissists, again, I don't like labels. Look at the symptoms, look at the behaviors, look at the characteristics, just for briefing it. Narcissists are nearly fucking empty inside, which is why they attach to people for identity. And you see this a lot in, like personality disorders. Look at the word in and of itself. The personality is disorderly. It's disorderly because it's not structured in a healthy way. If it was orderly, it wouldn't seek self externally. People that have personality disorders did not have healthy ego state development. They did not get healthy boundaries. They did not get to individuate. They did not get to differentiate. And it's a very serious thing, and it's very important to understand how this all corresponds to an unhealthy survival-based childhood. Because people that were raised with a healthy childhood did not have any of that stuff. They didn't have to worry about their identity surviving because they got the healthy boundaries. They got the individuation. They got the differentiation. They learned who they were because in childhood, healthy boundaries were set into place. They were allowed to and encouraged to individuate and differentiate. Okay, yes, you are a part of this family biologically, but we're going to set you up with healthy boundaries. You're not going to take on any of our stuff. We're going to contain you and give you healthy mirroring so that you can develop with a healthy ego state in a healthy way. Individuate, differentiate. The child comes to know themselves confidently because of the healthy boundaries, because of the individual. And let me make this very clear. Healthy boundaries show a child, oh, I can validate and approve of myself. I can accept myself. I can love myself. I do not need to seek that outside. Survival-based childhoods teach children, okay, in order to survive, in order for your identity to survive, you need to go look out there. Somebody else out there has the answer. You're not good enough. You're not. And that's the thing too, because the whole idea of unworth, lack of self-worth and everything, it's just passed down generationally, but it still fucks up the child. So, the parent thinks that they're not good enough, and because they lack healthy boundaries, they project that onto their child, and then their child learns that, and then their child learns to develop this identity that needs to do things to survive, survival-based identity. And then it goes out there, and it looks for the worth out there. So what your survival-based childhood teaches you about self-worth is that in order to survive as the identity that was raised in survival, your self-worth is out there in somebody else. It is out there in something. A lot of people believe that their self-worth is in somebody else. You ever hear somebody say oh, I'm looking for my person. Your person is right here. And when I say that, I'm not referring to myself. Imagine you were me. You are your person. You were probably taught that your other half is out there. You're not incomplete. You might believe that you are because of the way that you were raised in survival. The identity has to survive, so it believes that it is half or incomplete and needs to seek externally for its own fulfillment. Now, yeah, you will develop relationships, you will form relationships, but understand if they're relationships based around survival, seeking self-worth in somebody else and something else, or if it's healthy and the person that you are in a relationship with, whether platonic or romantic, is boundaried and they don't validate you because they don't need to. But also they would in terms of validating your experiences in life. They're not going to gaslight you. They're not going to be like, oh, that's nothing. What you've been through is nothing compared to what I've been through. Invalidation, gaslighting, all of that stuff. The entire dynamics between self and other are different. The intersubjective space between self and other are different in healthy relationships. And it's very important to understand this. Just again, so to make it very clear before I end off this video, what your survival-based childhood teaches you about self-worth is that it's out there. And that in order for your identity to continue to survive, you need to seek self-worth externally. In a person, multiple people, a thing, multiple things, whatever it is, you have learned to tie your self-worth to the external because you were raised in survival with a surviving identity to do so. In survival and childhood, you did a bunch of things that you didn't want to. You learned to fight back because people lacked healthy boundaries and they projected their shit onto you, and that was painful. So you got defense mechanisms. You learned to flight. You learned to run away from pain rather than be present with it because you probably did not get healthy containment. You learned to shut down when somebody disrespected you because they were very authoritarian and they violated your boundaries with their own projections of their lack of healthy boundaried insecurities. And instead of bringing that to a licensed professional, they threw it at you. They fucking vomited it at you. And it's wild. It's another way of saying that is freeze, of course. Last one, people pleasing. You learned to do a bunch of things that you didn't want to do. And these are just like the basic foundational defense mechanisms. In order to defend against the pain, in order to defend against the pain of not getting what it was that you wanted and learning that you had to do things that you didn't want to do for people so that you would receive validation, approval, love, acceptance, you learned to be an appeaser. You learned to fawn. You learned to people please. Hey, I don't actually want to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway because I learned that if I don't, then I won't receive love, validation, approval, acceptance. Well, the reality is, if you feel pressured to do things that you don't want to do for somebody to receive love, validation, approval, acceptance, that is a broken, unhealthy, and exceedingly fucked up dynamic. That person doesn't love you for who you are. That person doesn't accept you for who you are. They love you for who you can be for them and what you can do for them. Consider yourself basically like an extension of them. Maybe you're like a finger, right? And if you're not working properly, they will get rid of you and take somebody else. Or if you're not working properly, they will abuse you. They will violate your boundaries. They will get you around until you get in line because they lack healthy boundaries. That's the reality of it. Your survival-based childhood taught you to seek self-worth, even though you don't need to seek self-worth in the external. You can validate yourself, you can accept yourself, you can approve of yourself, you can love yourself. But that's not what your survival-based childhood taught you.